Congressman, it's good to see you again under stupid circumstances, though.
Hey,
there's really no valid reason why you and I should be having this actual conversation. No. This is not an ideological debate. It's nothing. It's nonsensical because Donald Trump has told a bunch of Republican chaos agents to shut the government down.
MAGA Republicans tonight are the failures. They have failed to govern. They have failed to fund, and in their failure to govern and fund, they failed to protect. And Ali, because their number one priority is Donald Trump, the cost of that priority, the expense that we all pay, is that the troops will not receive their paychecks, the cops will not receive their paychecks, the border will not be secure, but the House will again continue to operate on behalf entirely of Donald Trump. They are the failures, and the country will continue to fail until the keys of government are turned over to someone else.
To what end, Eric Swalwell, to what end are these Republicans, who knows how many, maybe a couple dozen, why are they doing this?
They're doing it for Donald Trump, and they're doing it because they're scared, and frankly, they don't have the confidence in themselves that they could find another job. And it's crazy to say that, right? I would hope that I serve with people who have given up better, higher paying jobs to do this job for the country, but they're afraid that if they speak out on behalf of the country instead of a criminal in Donald Trump, that they would be primaried and they'd lose their job. And so we find ourselves in this position. And Kevin McCarthy is, individual one in this case, because as you pointed out at the top, Kevin McCarthy could put a bill forward that would fund the government, one that has nearly 80 votes in the Senate in a bipartisan way. We wouldn't see the border shut down. We wouldn't see troops lose their paycheck. He could do that with Democratic votes, but he's afraid that he would lose his job. And so he puts his own job ahead of millions of others whose jobs will be at risk in fewer than just about 30 hours.
Let's just underscore that, because there are ways in which Kevin McCarthy can make up for his the 2 dozen or so, whatever the number is, in his ranks, who will not apparently do anything. They will not compromise on anything by talking to Hakeem Jeffries and getting Democratic support. I've spoken to members of Congress, Democratic members of Congress, over the last few weeks, and Republican members of Congress who have said that is probably a good outcome for the country. As you said, millions of people will continue to get paid for their work if that happens. Kevin McCarthy will probably be out of a job if he tries that.
But who wants a job where you're beholden to these chaos agents? And again, frankly, if you really want to get in the weeds, and I know your viewers, they know the weeds, they know these issues. Kevin McCarthy could put this forward as he did when we paid America's bills and lifted the debt ceiling. Democrats delivered the votes for that. He could put this bill forward, keep government open. And these chaos agents, they don't have a plan B. They just want to see everything burn. And he would be a more confident, stronger speaker if he did that, because they would realize there is no plan B. But because he lives in fear, because he sees shadows every single day, and because he sees his own job as more important than anyone else's, we are going to suffer through this shutdown.
I have to ask you about what seems to be an escalation. I can't believe we're actually talking about an escalation in Donald Trump's rhetoric, but the talk about General Milley, I think he's called the parent company of my employer, treasonous as well, and then the I don't know if he bought a gun or he didn't buy a gun the other day, and then the talking about Paul Pelosi. I mean, I never really know that there's another bridge to cross with Donald Trump, but apparently he continues to cross bridges, and no one stops. Kevin McCarthy doesn't say enough. He doesn't say, I mean, he could have said this on January 7th. He did say it, after January 6th, but then he backtracked and hasn't said it since.
Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans prefer violence over voting, and that's because they are bankrupt of any ideas. They just want to own the libs. That's not a principled approach here, and so they just rely on violence. They had a failed insurrection, and again, they are the failures. Donald Trump's best day, Ali, was in November 2016, and he's been a loser ever since. He lost the midterms. He lost the White House in 20. They lost the Senate in 2020. We kept the House. They lost the chance to have the big red wave in 2022. We've won all of these special elections. So right now, people are on the side of competence over chaos. They're on the side of community over cruelty. And as awful as this is right now, I think if we understand that we have the ability to organize and mobilize as we go into the next election, we will continue to win, and they will just forever be the failures.